Picture this. You're standing at your front door at 3 a.m. Through the peephole, you see three men in dark clothing asking about your neighbor, the one who disappeared last week. Your phone buzzes. A text from an unknown number. They know you saw everything. Lie or join him. You have 30 seconds before they knock again. What if I told you that your survival right now in this very moment depends entirely on a lie you're about to tell? What if honesty, that sacred virtue drilled into us since childhood, that moral cornerstone of civilized society, is actually evolution's most elaborate trap, designed to eliminate the weak and preserve only those cunning enough to see through the illusion? Here's the uncomfortable truth they don't teach in ethics classes. Every person who has ever lived to tell their story, every survivor of history's darkest chapters, every individual who has navigated the treacherous waters of human society and emerged intact, they were all accomplished liars. The meek may inherit the earth, but the honest inherit graves. Are you ready to discover why the most successful humans in history, from ancient tribal leaders to modern billionaires, from wartime heroes to peaceful revolutionaries, were all master craftsmen in the art of deception? Are you prepared to learn that your moral compass might be pointing you straight toward destruction? Because once you understand what I'm about to reveal, there's no going back to that comfortable world where truth and survival peacefully coexist. Your brain is a lie detector and lie generator rolled into one magnificent, morally ambiguous machine. Right now, as you read these words, your prefrontal cortex, that sophisticated command center behind your forehead, is running millions of calculations, cross-referencing memories, assessing threats, and preparing potential deceptions should you need them. You didn't know you were doing this, did you? That's because lying isn't a bug in human programming. It's the most essential feature. Welcome to the deception detection arms race, a neurological Cold War that has been raging inside our skulls for over 200,000 years. Every human interaction is a chess match between competing neural networks. One system designed to spot lies, another engineered to create them. The social brain hypothesis suggests that our extraordinary intelligence didn't evolve to solve mathematical equations or build tools. It evolved to navigate the complex web of deception that defines human society. Consider this. Your mirror neurons, those remarkable cells that fire when you observe others' actions, aren't just helping you empathize. They're constantly scanning for micro-expressions, vocal inflections, and behavioral inconsistencies that might signal deception. Simultaneously, other neural circuits are modeling how to mask your own intentions, calculating which truths to reveal and which to hide. Your brain is literally playing both sides of an evolutionary game where the stakes are reproduction, resources, and survival. The most chilling revelation: societies that claim to value honesty above all else actually require their most skilled liars to function. Think about it. Diplomats who negotiate peace treaties, doctors who deliver terminal diagnoses with hope, leaders who must inspire confidence during disasters. The fabric of civilization is woven from necessary deceptions, and those who refuse to participate don't become moral exemplars, they become casualties. Here's what neuroscience has discovered that will make you question everything. Honest people aren't more moral, they're simply less cognitively sophisticated. The capacity for strategic deception requires advanced theory of mind, emotional regulation, working memory, and executive function. In other words, lying well is a sign of intelligence, not moral failure. Meet Juan Pujol Garcia, a Spanish chicken farmer who became the most successful double agent in human history. A man whose lies were so masterful they changed the course of World War II and saved thousands of Allied lives. His story isn't just history. It's a masterclass in survival deception that reveals the true power of strategic dishonesty. In 1941, Garcia found himself in an impossible position. Franco's Spain was officially neutral, but the country seethed with the Nazi sympathizers and Allied supporters. As a young man with anti-fascist beliefs, Garcia faced a choice: remain silent and watch evil triumph, or find a way to fight back. He chose a third option that would have seemed insane to any honest person. He decided to become a Nazi spy. Garcia approached the German intelligence service with a fabricated story about his connections and his burning desire to serve the Reich. The Germans, impressed by his apparent enthusiasm and his claimed access to British society, codenamed him Arabelle and sent him to Britain. There was just one problem. Garcia never went to Britain. Instead, he set up shop in Lisbon and began crafting the most elaborate deception in espionage history. From his base in Portugal, Garcia created an entire fictional spy network. He invented 27 different agents, complete with detailed backstories, personalities, and specialized skills. There was the Welsh nationalist fascist, the Venezuelan student, the American serviceman, and dozens of others, all existing only in Garcia's imagination and the reports he sent to Berlin. He studied maps, read British newspapers, and constructed believable intelligence reports about Allied activities, carefully mixing truth with fiction in proportions that made his lies irresistible. The psychological profile of the perfect deceiver becomes clear in Garcia's story. He possessed what psychologists now recognize as essential traits: extraordinary creativity, emotional detachment from conventional morality, pattern recognition abilities that allowed him to understand what his targets wanted to hear, and the cognitive flexibility to maintain multiple competing narratives simultaneously. Most crucially, he had developed what we might call narrative immunity, the ability to believe in his own lies just enough to sell them convincingly, while maintaining sufficient psychological distance to avoid becoming trapped by them. When the Allies finally discovered Garcia's operation, instead of arresting him, they recruited him. Codenamed Garbo, he began feeding carefully crafted disinformation to the Germans. His greatest triumph came in 1944, when his fictional spy network convinced Hitler that the D-Day landings at Normandy were merely a diversionary attack. The Germans held back crucial reinforcements, waiting for the real invasion that Garcia promised was coming elsewhere. Those lies may have saved more lives than any honest act in history. The uncomfortable truth about human psychology is that we exist in multiple realities simultaneously, and our survival depends on our ability to navigate between them with precision. What we call lying is actually a sophisticated form of reality management, the conscious selection of which truth to present to which audience at which moment for optimal outcomes. Consider the taxonomy of survival deception. White lies lubricate social interactions, preventing the friction that would tear communities apart. Protective lies shield the vulnerable from harsh realities they cannot yet handle. Strategic lies create space for growth and opportunity in hostile environments. And existential lies, perhaps the most crucial of all, allow us to function despite the overwhelming absurdity and terror of human existence. The person who claims they never lie is either profoundly self-deceptive or has never faced a situation where truth meant destruction. Cognitive load theory reveals why some individuals become natural masters of deception, while others crumble under the weight of a single white lie. The brain processes truth and falsehood differently, with lies requiring significantly more neural resources to construct and maintain. Those with higher working memory capacity, better emotional regulation, and superior executive function can manage these cognitive demands effortlessly. They don't lie because they're immoral. They lie because they're equipped with the mental architecture to do so effectively. The emotional intelligence dimension of deception is perhaps most fascinating. Master deceivers possess an almost supernatural ability to read micro-expressions, vocal inflections, and postural changes that reveal the emotional states of others. They understand that successful deception isn't about crafting perfect lies. It's about crafting the lies that specific individuals are psychologically prepared to believe. They intuitively grasp the cognitive biases, emotional needs, and worldview limitations of their targets, then tailor their deceptions accordingly. Cultural anthropology reveals another layer of complexity. Societies across the globe have developed vastly different frameworks for evaluating deception. Japanese tatame versus hon distinctions, the concept of face in Chinese culture, the elaborate courtesy deceptions of Southern American hospitality. These aren't moral failings, but sophisticated social technologies that allow complex societies to function without constant conflict. The dark triad personality traits, narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy, correlate strongly with deceptive ability. But here's where conventional psychology gets it wrong. These traits aren't inherently pathological. They're adaptive responses to environments where traditional moral frameworks prove inadequate for survival. The narcissist's grandiose self-presentation, the Machiavellian strategic thinking, the psychopath's emotional detachment. In certain contexts, these become survival superpowers. This brings us to the concept of moral flexibility, perhaps the most crucial psychological skill for navigating modern life. Rigid adherence to absolute moral principles is a luxury afforded only to those who have never faced genuine existential threats. The psychologically mature individual understands that ethics must be contextual, and that survival sometimes requires us to become people we don't recognize, and that the capacity for authentic deception, lying while maintaining core identity integrity, may be the highest form of psychological sophistication. Welcome to the era where reality itself has become negotiable, where your digital footprint is more real than your physical presence, and where the line between authentic self-expression and strategic deception has dissolved entirely. In this new landscape, those who cling to outdated notions of absolute honesty aren't just naive, they're extinct. Consider your social media presence. Every carefully curated photo, every strategically timed post, every calculated omission of unflattering details. You're not documenting your life. You're constructing a narrative designed to achieve specific psychological and social outcomes. The Instagram influencer who presents a life of effortless luxury while secretly struggling with debt isn't engaging in immoral deception. They're participating in the new economy of attention, where perception literally becomes reality and authenticity becomes a performance art. The corporate world has evolved into a sophisticated ecosystem of necessary deceptions. Companies don't just compete on product quality anymore, they compete on narrative construction. The startup founder who presents unwavering confidence to investors while privately terrified of failure, the executive who speaks of right-sizing instead of layoffs, the brand that crafts stories of environmental responsibility while quietly optimizing for profit. These aren't moral failures, but adaptive strategies in an environment where brutal honesty equals business suicide. Political leadership in the digital age requires a level of deceptive sophistication that would have been unimaginable to previous generations. Modern leaders must simultaneously maintain authentic connections with diverse constituencies while navigating complex international relationships, economic pressures, and media scrutiny. The politician who promises to tell it like it is either lying about their intentions or doomed to failure. Effective leadership requires the ability to present different versions of truth to different audiences without losing core identity integrity. Personal branding has become survival strategy. Your LinkedIn profile, your dating app presentations, your professional networking all require careful calibration between authentic self-expression and strategic positioning. The person who presents themselves with complete transparency in all contexts isn't being admirably honest. They're demonstrating a fundamental misunderstanding of how modern social and economic systems function. Perhaps most crucially, digital privacy has transformed deception from a moral choice into a practical necessity. In a surveillance economy where your data is harvested, analyzed, and monetized without your meaningful consent, the ability to maintain privacy through strategic misdirection becomes a form of digital self-defense. The person who shares everything honestly online isn't being virtuous, they're being exploited. The metaverse and virtual reality technologies represent the ultimate convergence of reality and deception. In these spaces, identity becomes fluid, truth becomes malleable, and the very concepts of authentic versus artificial experience lose meaning. Those who master these environments won't be the most honest users. They'll be those who understand how to navigate multiple simultaneous realities while maintaining psychological coherence. Now we arrive at the heart of the moral maze, where clean philosophical principles collide with the messy reality of human existence, and where the comfortable certainties of childhood ethics crumble under the weight of impossible choices. This is where most people's moral courage fails them, not because they lack principles, but because they refuse to acknowledge that principles without context become weapons of self-destruction. Picture the classic trolley problem reimagined for the age of deception. A runaway trolley speeds toward 5 people tied to the tracks. You can pull a lever to divert it to a side track, where it will kill 1 person instead. But here's the twist. The only way to convince the authorities to let you pull the lever is to lie about who the people are, creating a false narrative that makes the choice seem obvious. Do you tell the truth and watch 5 people die, or do you lie and save them? The utilitarian calculus is clear, but most people would rather preserve their moral purity than dirty their hands with necessary deception. This is the fundamental delusion of ethical thinking in comfortable societies, the belief that we can maintain moral cleanliness while others do the dirty work of survival on our behalf. The doctor who lies to give terminal patients hope, the diplomat who lies to prevent wars, the parent who lies to protect their child's innocence. They're not moral failures, but moral heroes who understand that sometimes love requires deception. Consider a protective deception, perhaps the most morally complex form of strategic dishonesty. When you lie to Nazi soldiers about hiding Jewish neighbors, when you lie to abusive authorities about the whereabouts of political dissidents, when you lie to predators about vulnerable people in your care, these acts violate the principle of honesty while serving the higher principle of protecting innocent life. The person who chooses honesty in these situations isn't morally superior. They're complicit in the harm that follows. The social contract of white lies reveals another layer of ethical complexity. Every day, we participate in countless small deceptions that make civilized society possible. How are you? Fine, thanks. That haircut looks great. Of course, I remember your name. These aren't moral failures, but social lubricants that prevent the constant friction that would make human cooperation impossible. The person who insists on brutal honesty in all social interactions isn't more ethical. They're socially destructive. Cultural relativism adds yet another dimension to the ethical labyrinth. What constitutes acceptable deception varies dramatically across cultures, historical periods, and social contexts. The elaborate courtesy deceptions of Japanese society, the strategic ambiguity of diplomatic language, the protective silence of communities under oppression, these represent sophisticated moral technologies developed over centuries to navigate specific survival challenges. Perhaps most challenging of all is the burden placed on truth-tellers in corrupt systems. When institutions fail, when authorities become predatory, when social structures become mechanisms of oppression, the person who continues to operate by conventional moral rules isn't preserving virtue. They're enabling evil through their complicity. Sometimes the most moral act is to lie to the system while working to change it from within. The time for philosophy has ended. Now we enter the realm of practical application, where theoretical understanding transforms into survival skills. What follows isn't a manual for manipulation. It's a toolkit for ethical navigation through a world where the naive perish and the prepared thrive. Environmental assessment forms the foundation of survival deception. Before you speak, before you act, before you reveal or conceal, you must read the room with the precision of a battlefield commander. Who holds power in this space? What are their psychological vulnerabilities and cognitive biases? What narratives are they psychologically invested in believing? What would happen if you told the complete truth right now? The master of ethical deception understands that context determines everything, and that the same truth can be either a bridge or a bomb depending on timing and audience. Controlling your tells requires understanding that your body betrays your intentions constantly through micro-expressions, vocal variations, postural changes, and unconscious behavioral patterns. The key isn't to eliminate these signals, that's impossible and actually suspicious, but to manage them strategically. Learn to recognize your stress responses, practice emotional regulation under pressure, and develop the ability to access genuine emotional states that support your necessary deceptions. The goal isn't to become a sociopathic manipulator, but to gain conscious control over unconscious processes. Constructing believable narratives demands understanding the architecture of convincing lies. The most effective deceptions contain substantial elements of truth, follow logical cause and effect patterns, align with the target's existing beliefs and experiences, and include authentic emotional content. Never craft deceptions from pure fiction. Instead, select and arrange true elements in ways that create the impression you need while maintaining plausible deniability. The best lies are technically true from a certain perspective. Timing and delivery can transform the same deception from obvious manipulation into seamless social navigation. Learn to recognize psychological openness in others, moments when their defenses are lowered and their minds are receptive to new information. Understand the power of strategic silence, the importance of emotional congruence between your message and delivery method, and the art of letting others draw the conclusions you want them to reach rather than stating them directly. Exit strategies separate amateurs from professionals in the deception arts. Before you construct any significant deception, plan for its eventual exposure or obsolescence. How will you transition to truth when the deception is no longer necessary? How will you minimize damage if the deception is discovered prematurely? How will you maintain relationships and reputation despite the revelation of strategic dishonesty? The master deceiver always controls the endgame. Building authentic relationships, despite necessary deceptions, represents, perhaps, the highest skill in survival psychology. The goal isn't to deceive everyone about everything. That leads to isolation and psychological fragmentation. Instead, develop the ability to compartmentalize different aspects of your life while maintaining genuine connections with trusted individuals who understand and accept your complexity. Create circles of trust where you can be increasingly authentic as proximity and relationship depth allow. The compartmentalization technique allows you to maintain psychological integrity while managing multiple necessary deceptions simultaneously. Think of your mind as containing different chambers, each with its own reality, relationships, and behavioral requirements. The key is preventing these chambers from contaminating each other while maintaining an overarching sense of core identity that transcends any single deceptive role. Now comes the moment of truth. Not the comfortable truth of moral platitudes, but the uncomfortable truth of self-examination. The questions that follow aren't philosophical exercises. They're psychological diagnostics designed to reveal who you really are beneath the layers of social conditioning and moral pretense. Imagine you're living in Nazi-occupied Europe, 1943. 3 Jewish children are hidden in your basement. The Gestapo knocks on your door, asking directly if you're harboring any Jewish refugees. Your answer in the next 5 seconds determines whether 3 innocent children live or die. Do you tell the truth and watch them be dragged away to certain death, or do you lie and save their lives? Now here's the real question. If you chose to lie, what does that say about every moral judgment you've ever made about others who deceived for survival? Think about your own life. When was the last time you lied to survive, not just physically, but psychologically, socially, economically? When did you craft a careful omission to protect a relationship? When did you present a strategic version of yourself to secure a job, navigate a conflict, or shield someone you love from harsh reality? What did it cost you, and what did it save? The person who claims they can't remember such a moment is either remarkably privileged or remarkably self-deceptive. Here's a moral flexibility test that will reveal more about your character than any personality assessment. Your teenage daughter comes home pregnant, terrified, and begging you not to tell her religious, conservative grandparents who would disown her. She needs their continued support for college, but can't bear their judgment. Meanwhile, they're planning a family celebration where her pregnancy will become obvious. How far would you bend the truth to protect both relationships? Would you help her craft a narrative that preserves family unity, or would you insist on brutal honesty regardless of the consequences? Take inventory of the people surrounding you right now. How many of them are necessary liars, individuals whose strategic deceptions make your comfortable life possible? Your doctor who presents optimistic prognoses to help patients fight terminal illnesses. Your political representatives who promise more than they can deliver to maintain hope during crises. Your friends who tell you that your bad decisions aren't that bad to preserve your mental health. The therapists, teachers, leaders, and loved ones who understand that sometimes truth must be rationed carefully to prevent psychological destruction. Are you surrounded by moral failures or by people sophisticated enough to understand that love sometimes requires deception? Consider the future scenarios you might face. Climate change accelerates, economic systems destabilize, political structures collapse, or personal crises emerge that shatter your current reality. In a world where resources become scarce and institutions become unreliable, what lies might you need to tell to protect yourself and those you love? When competing groups make survival claims on your loyalty, which truths will you share and which will you conceal? The person who believes they'll maintain perfect honesty through any crisis has never truly contemplated what survival might require. Finally, confront this uncomfortable question. Now that you understand the sophisticated psychology behind strategic deception, now that you recognize its necessity in complex moral situations, can you ever again make simple judgments about others who choose survival over honesty? Have you gained wisdom, or have you lost the comfortable certainty that once made moral decisions seem easy? You've reached the point of no return. The comfortable illusions of moral simplicity lie shattered behind you, and ahead stretches a landscape where truth and deception dance together in patterns too complex for the naive to comprehend. The weight of this awakening settles on your shoulders like a mantle of responsibility, because once you see the machinery of survival deception, you can never again claim ignorance of how the world actually works. This knowledge comes with a terrible burden. You now understand that the moral landscape is not a simple battlefield between good and evil, but a complex ecosystem where survival often requires becoming someone your former self wouldn't recognize. You've seen how the most moral acts can require the most sophisticated deceptions, how love sometimes demands lies, and how honesty can become a weapon of destruction in the wrong hands. The innocent certainty of childhood ethics has died, replaced by the heavy wisdom of moral complexity. But with this burden comes unprecedented power. You no longer move through the world as a moral amateur, making decisions based on simplistic rules that crumble under pressure. You understand the psychological architecture of deception, the evolutionary necessity of strategic dishonesty, and the cultural technologies that allow complex societies to function. You can read the hidden currents of human interaction, recognize the necessary lies that surround you, and navigate moral complexity with sophisticated precision. The responsibility that accompanies this knowledge is enormous. You must decide how to use these insights ethically, how to maintain your humanity while mastering the arts of survival, and how to build authentic relationships despite understanding the strategic elements of all human interaction. You face the challenge of becoming more honest by understanding deception, using your knowledge to create genuine connections while protecting yourself and others from the naive brutality of uncontrolled truth. Building resilience for an uncertain future now becomes your urgent task. The world grows more complex, more connected, and more volatile with each passing year. The institutions that once provided stable moral guidance show signs of strain, and the social contracts that once made simple honesty possible grow increasingly fragile. You must prepare for moments when your survival and the survival of those you love may depend on your ability to navigate between multiple realities, to construct necessary narratives, and to make moral decisions that transcend simple categories of truth and falsehood. You are no longer alone in this complexity. Around the world, others have undergone similar awakenings, recognizing that moral sophistication requires understanding the strategic elements of human survival. These individuals form an invisible community, not of manipulators or sociopaths, but of people who understand that love sometimes requires deception, that protection sometimes demands strategic silence, and that the highest moral acts often cannot be recognized by those who lack the psychological sophistication to understand their necessity. The ultimate paradox awaits your embrace. You must become more authentically yourself by understanding the constructed nature of all identity, more genuinely honest by mastering the arts of strategic deception, and more morally reliable by acknowledging the contextual nature of all ethical decisions. This isn't corruption, it's evolution. This isn't the death of morality, it's its sophisticated maturation. The mirror stands before you now, reflecting not the comfortable image of moral simplicity you once recognized, but the complex figure of someone who has stared into the abyss of human nature and found it staring back with knowing eyes. The questions that follow aren't merely intellectual curiosities. They are the final tests of your transformation, the measures by which you'll know whether you've truly integrated this dangerous knowledge or whether you'll retreat into the safety of willful ignorance. Now that you know the truth about deception, that it's woven into the very fabric of human survival, that your brain is designed for it, that civilization depends on it, that love requires it, can you ever be the same person you were when you began reading? Can you ever again look at human interactions without seeing the strategic calculations beneath the surface? Can you watch the news, engage in politics, navigate relationships, or make moral judgments with the same innocent certainty you once possessed? The knowledge has changed you at a cellular level, altered your neural pathways, and transformed your perception of reality itself. You face a choice that defines who you are becoming. Will you choose the comfortable ignorance of moral absolutes, retreating into the simplified worldview where truth is always good and lies are always evil? Will you join the ranks of those who prefer beautiful illusions to ugly realities, who would rather feel virtuous than be effective, who choose moral purity over moral complexity? Or will you embrace the uncomfortable wisdom of understanding that survival sometimes requires becoming someone your former self wouldn't recognize? The ultimate question of personal evolution confronts you. Are you ready to become someone who survives, not just physically, but psychologically, socially, and spiritually? Are you prepared to navigate a world where moral decisions require sophisticated analysis rather than simple rule following? Can you handle the responsibility of understanding that your choices affect not just your own survival, but the survival of everyone who depends on you? Tomorrow morning, you will wake up and engage with the world. You'll speak to family members, colleagues, friends, and strangers. You'll make decisions about what to reveal and what to conceal, what truths to share and what protective silences to maintain. The question that will define your character is this: what lies will you tell tomorrow and why? Will they be the unconscious deceptions of someone who hasn't examined their own moral complexity? Or will they be the conscious choices of someone who understands that survival sometimes requires strategic navigation between multiple truths? The transformation is complete. You are no longer innocent, and you can never be innocent again. The only question remaining is whether you'll use this knowledge to become more human, or whether you'll use it to transcend the limitations of those who still believe that morality is simple and that survival comes without a price.